Chapter 19. Stealing away ferret-like from the scene of his downfall, Ed Gurley appeared to have changed character completely. Gone was his conscious air of rectitude and his meek-mannered humility. The pious eyes had grown fierce, and Gurley moved from the lanky prowl of a panther. He knew that his fugitive flight spelt tact assent to the damning charges which Pat Stevens had hurled. No need was further confession. Those charges were all true enough. Gurley was washed up on this range. Not from his shrewd brain the forlorn hope of fighting further in defense of the hopeless cause. Curiously enough, all Gurley's vitriolic hate was directed towards the one man who had brought about his defeat. Could he have planted a treacherous slug between Pat Stevens' shoulder blades, he would have done so, not without shame or regret, or even a single twinge of departed manhood, but with autocracy and fierce joy. But Pat had taught him the full meaning of an impenetrable stone wall. He could never reach Stevens, and he didn't expect to try. So he stole a saddle horse from the deserted lower end of town and struck out across the range. Far less apt in the leather than he had long chosen to appear, he lost no time in reaching the virtual abandoned Plum Bob Ranch. As he expected, Gurley found only a Mexican attendant or two left about the place. Familiar as his figure was here, they didn't seem to interfere as he made his bold way through the rambling ranch house straight to old Doc's gun-cluttered bedroom. Gurley knew his way about there and moved directly towards a massive safe built into the adobe wall. Even the combination, learned years before on a commonplace pretext and never forgotten, was no barrier to him now. Yet he blinked at the sight of the heaps of old land scrips and property deeds, the titles and bundles of paper money with which Doc Marble had carelessly stuffed the safe in the course of a prosperous quarter century. For the large-visioned Plum Bob range baron, banks were only a business convenience, conventional interests, and an illusion. The bulk of his stupendous fortune, or such at least was liquid and portable, lay here in various forms. Impatiently, Gurley pawed aside the mounds of legal papers and even the clinking bags of silver dollars. They were too bulky and too heavy for his purpose. A smaller, deerskin sack of gold coins he did stow away somewhere in his clothes, and he began methodically stuffing a money belt with greenbacks of large denomination. At last, his bony hand rested on a gun thrust under his belt. He turned away without bothering to close the looted safe. The Mexicans watched him emerge hastily to the yard, their black eyes alone moving. In the dark, Gurley reached his horse and flung himself astride. Urgency ruled him cruelly now. 10 minutes later, driving west, he still threw weary glances over his shoulder, fearful of some incredible last-minute hitch. None yet appeared. The night range stretched away on every side, silent and anemic. But within an hour, the smug smile wreathing Gurley's long-lipped mouth began to fade. In his haste, he had forgotten food, and above all, water, and the trail stretched before him was long and dry. He could easily last till dawn, and perhaps tomorrow midday, but astride a horse not his own, he must avoid the Mexican settlements and even isolated ranches for a long time to come. And what about Indians? They scattered the desert for miles on this side of the Arizona line, and they did not talk. Yet the stories of dark treachery surrounding them gave reason to avoid even their kindness. Gurley was still pondering his problem towards midnight when a flickering point of light across the boundless range caught his eye. He stared, hauled in, then thrust boldly on. The very thing. Funny he hadn't thought of it before. At this remote Plum Bob cow camp, 30 miles from headquarters, he was still an unquestioned ranch authority. No one here could know his real errand, and tonight, at least, he could claim food, a utensil or two, and even a pause of rest without fear. If he wondered why marbles punchers, cut off from the world and working hard during the days, were gathered about a blazing campfire at this late hour, he had his answer when he jogged towards the corner of the dirt-roofed log cabin into the flickering light. Dispatching from the others, a lanky rider stood back, peering sharply. "Jose?" he called inquiringly, and then froze. "Oh, no, that's our friend Gurley. Large as life and come to call," sounded the cutting drawl. It was Billy the Kid, his buck teeth wolfish in the glow of the firelight. Gurley blanched at the devilish fatality which had brought about this inopportune meeting. Too late to turn back, he sat there, tense and trembling, but outwardly colorless. One of the Seven River crowd, advancing, caught his bridle. "Get down," Bonnie ordered smoothly. "You're pretty sharp, Gurley, finding us where Garrett couldn't. Come to straighten out things, I expect." Gurley was scarcely conscious of sliding to the ground and allowing himself to be pushed towards the fire. A cold chill had congealed his blood, never too rich and warm. Bill Bonnie coolly ripped the 6 gun from his belt and tossed it aside, and patted his loose clothing investigatively. "What's this?" The Kid batted the alarmed agent's hands roughly aside and drew out the fat poke of gold coins. Not bad. Double pay for them 7-hook beeves, I suppose." "Give that back," Gurley got out jerkingly. "That's mine." Thrusting him away, Bonnie regarded him sadistically. "You mean it was yours," he corrected lightly. "Or was it? Damned if I don't think you stole it. Where would you get such an amount of money like that, you church mouse? Look him over again, Dave," he directed Rude, whose bloody head bandage made him look like a pirate. Gurley was a nervous wreck when Rude yanked forth the stuffed money belt, but the outlaw ignored him, fingering the sheaves of money. "Ransom money, no doubt," Bonnie grunted callously. "Must be to buy Bill Block out of hell, where you and Toller sent him." His pale eyes searched Gurley's colorless face. I didn't do," Gurley gasped. He broke off then, understanding, finally, the utter hopelessness of his position. He rushed forward blindly. The Kid deftly fought him off with a knee, and Ed blundered awkwardly into Frank McNabb and grappled with him, and the outlaw flung him off with a single effort. "You crossed me over on them stairs, didn't you, Gurley?" Bonnie whipped out. I, Ed whispered, struggling to his knees. White as parchment paper, he read the inevitable. "You paid Bull Toller a few miserable dollars to murder Block, didn't you?" Bonnie rifled harshly. "Come on now, let's have it." Gurley's lips quivered, and no words came. "Tried to frame me into killing the marbles, too," the Kid grated on contemptuously. "Leave you a clear field with the money, that big ranch, and 1,000,000 cows." Ed's groan was that of a man of torment. His bony hands fluttered, a purely instinctive plea for the mercy he well knew to be non-existent. "Well, am I right?" the Kid shot out with insistence. Gurley's unnerved nod may have been the last bid for clemency. Almost casually, Bonnie's snake-like left hand flicked to his waist, and he shot the abject, cowering business agent through the head. If a dynamite charge had been detonated in their midst, it could not have created a greater outburst of activity among the hard-faced outlaws. None bothered to watch Gurley slump forward and relax, as if eternal rest were his one last refuge. "Get up on the horses," Bonnie tossed at Jim French. He bent over Gurley briefly, doing something to the inert body, then straightened. The others hastily carried saddles and firearms from the cabin, and hitting the leather in record time, they thundered off into the night. The fire flickered out, and then died. White ashes scattered about the brush. And at dawn, 2 bands of horsemen converged on the lonely cow camp, arriving almost together. Pat Stevens was the first to spot Gurley's form. Having dismounted, he turned the body over with a shake of his head. "Bonnie was here, Garnet," he told the leader of the other party. "How he came across Gurley is a mystery, but it's plain enough what the result was." Clay Marble found the money belt on the agent and held up the dangling doe skin strip. He was still visibly stuffed with bills. Old Doc roared at the sight. "Dang that Bonnie! He knew that money was here," he burst out. "Leaving it behind is his way of thumbing his nose at all of us, with the proof that Gurley was a bigger crook and thief than he'll ever be. I don't regret them gold double eagles no more. We'll say they helped to square for Bill Block's mistake and mine for ever trusting Gurley." Sheriff Garnett's posse took the trail of the kid without delay, streamers of dust swirling behind their horses. Sheriff Elmy assumed charge of Gurley's remains, seeing to their burial on the spot, while Pat and his friends and the Marbles turned back towards the plumb bob. As for Clay, he could scarcely wait to get at a number of pressing chores which awaited his attention, and it was all he could do to break away from his father, whose spirit of iron domination appeared to have softened at last. Several days later, a sizable herd of steers, wearing the distinct plumb bob brand, could be seen winding over the trail not far from Apache Cache. 2 men rode at the point, and one of them, a black-headed young fellow of cheerful mind, was singing lustfully. "Reckon you got a good reason to be happy, Marble." Ezra rode forward to toss out crustily, breaking in on the other's song. "And we can stand it if we have to, but what effect it'll have on them cows I had no idea." "Oh, lay off, Ezra," Sam called over the bobbing backs. "I always thought you was jealous of good singing, even when it is mine." Clay laughed at their jibes. "You birds would both do better amongst a bunch of crows," he threw back lightly. "You'd seem more like a natural home to you." The good-natured banter continued till they grew busy herding the steers down the last rocky slopes towards the gateway into the cache. To their surprise, on starting to file between the granite bastions guarding the valley, they were met by a veritable delegation of more than a dozen husky Mormon ranchers armed with rifles, and this time with old May Schoonover at their head. The patriarchal leader jogged forward as Pat and Clay reined their way to awaiting developments. Perhaps he failed to take note of their friendly, waving hands. "Sorry to delay you, young men, anything," the rolling voice called to them. "But my boys want to know the full meaning of this. Outside cattle have always spelled trouble for us in the end." "We're holding the steers here, Schoonover." Clay nodded with new authority. "If you'll ask one of your boys to go and fetch Press Moon pronto, what I'll have to say to him will explain matters to y'all." After a brief chinwag amongst the Mormons, they had agreed to, and the stalwart horseman hastened away. Ezra, Sam, and several plumb bob ranchers held the steers quiet, while Clay and Pat made a decorous conversation with Schoonover. The bearded religious leader deplored the violent deaths of the Conklin and Gurley, but allowed the possibility of a new era of peace and quiet. Press Moon presently came riding up, hawk-like and alert at the summon. He faced Clay before the others with dignity. "You wanted me, Marble?" he opened up gruffly. "I do. Got good news for you, Moon," Clay declared. "Doc meant all along to play square with you, and to prove it, here's the herd he meant you to take on shares. His own brand this time, and I'm carrying the signed agreement to make it all regular. We'll ask Stevens and Schoonover to witness it. Is that satisfactory with you?" A smile encroached on Moon's severity of expression. "Well, that's handsome," he allowed. "I was about to arrange for restocking on Axe Head Canyon. This'll save me the trouble," he added with startling understatement. "I reckon there's more'n 100 head here, too." There's double that amount, Clay replied, and a dozen or so more than the agreement calls for, in fact. Dad figured the Cash boys might appreciate a barbecue and warned me to pick out a few fat steers. Even May Schoonover's rigidity of manner was beginning to thaw. Well, that's decent of Marble to remember all of us. Hope it means he'll eat with us on the appointed day, in the spirit of friendship, he added bluntly. He will, Schoonover, Pat put in quietly. Marble definitely wants it understood that Apache Cash does not and never did interest him as rangeland. It's your trade that he's wanting. You'll all be welcome in Castle Gate from now on. Schoonover replied appropriately. The papers attended to. At a sign from him, even the Mormon riders helped haze the plumb bob steers in the direction of Moon's Canyon home. Once there, however, the others saw Clay turn his back and head for the Axe Head Ranch at a brisk pace. He had noted Esther's conspicuous absence in the cache, and the fact bothered him no little. Had it any special significance, Clay could not rest until he knew. He raced up to the kitchen door and hauled in with an impatient yank of the rein, and before he could slide down, a vision appeared in the door. Stars shone in Esther's brown eyes as she stood there, transfixed. So, you've come at last, she murmured softly. Esther, he exclaimed, reaching the ground, and making for her in a clumsy haste. You look mighty sweet in that apron. You always did, and I reckon you always will. His brown face reddened. He couldn't hold back the eager words. You look well yourself, she smiled, less worried. Are you fully exonerated from the law, Clay? Cleared for good of all those foolish charges, he said happily. Me and Ezra both. Now that Stevens has tipped Gurley's crooked hand, I'm already thinking of other things, Esther. She pretended to overlook his meaningful tone. I'm afraid you still have some explaining to do to Dad and Mr. Schoonover about the 7-hook cattle, she demurred gently. Nope, that's done, he told her. About the plumb bob herd turned over to her father and the piece of talk with the Mormon leader. But don't get me wrong, Esther. I didn't do it all. Pat Stevens the best thing that ever happened to this range. He befriended us and saw us through. Well, don't be forgetting Ezra and Sam, she added. Clay grinned. I'd sure rather be friends with that pair than anything else, he affirmed. Well, is there anything else then? Her echoing words were wistful. I thought... He grabbed her forearm impulsively. Esther, you know what I mean. But what are you going to do with yourself now? The girl thrust in hastily. There are still the 7-hook steers to be returned, and your job there in the Pecos. I'll drive those steers home, of course. It'll be a pleasure, though, to hand over my resignation down there along with the steers. Your resignation? Then you're coming home, Clay? Yeah, I'm coming home to manage Dad's plumb bob the way it should be managed, he returned boldly. I don't believe Dad and I will ever have any more troubles getting along together again. He understands me better now, if that proves the extent of my troubles. Your troubles? Esther simulated a pretty concern. But surely you're capable of managing even that big ranch without difficulty. I don't know. He shook his head mysteriously. A man always needs something more than a job to hold him steady. I could use some help. His eyes were fixed on hers, warm and significant. You can't mean, she faltered. Yes, I do, Esther. His wavering hope strengthened. I'll make the try alone, of course, but I need help awfully bad and for a long time to come. Your help, he ended soberly. The girl flushed rosy. Never let it be said that I'm not a good Samaritan in a cause as worthy of this. With a cry, Clay sprang forward, enfolding her into his hungry arms, and the silence was long, yet he was conscious of no loss for words at its end. With you at my side, I'll run that plumb bob to a fare you well and be looking for odd jobs on the side, he he boasted. If it was a boyish brag, there could be little doubt from her reaction that she believed him completely. End of chapter 19. End of Guns in the Saddle by Peter Field. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along this wonderful story. It's been a pleasure reading it to you all, reading it myself, and getting all those wonderful comments of encouragement in the comments below. All the thumbs up, all the interactions, they certainly do encourage me to carry on with this journey of reading to you all. So thank you. If you'd be interested in purchasing a digital copy to have for yourself of this audiobook, I can make you a thumb drive and the MP3 version. It would then be just the audio with none of the background video. So you could just play it on a desktop or inside a vehicle and have it at your disposal whenever you want to listen to it. The cost would be $15 plus shipping. Shipping shouldn't be very much, so $5 should cover that. If you would like something like that, just leave a comment down below and I should notice it and I'll try and reach out to you. And I'll also include a free audio book out of my library that I've recorded, include that for free as well. I'll pick one out random and surprise you. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along on this journey. We will catch you on the next one. Bye for now.